Hello and welcome to AUC TV. I'm your host, Nadina Wadallah. In June, the AUC community was surprised to receive an email announcing the departure of President Lisa Anderson, who had been in office since 2011, and that a presidential search committee would be looking for a replacement throughout the incoming semester. The announcement came just a few years short of the university's 100th anniversary, leaving many wondering what changes AUC may come to face. Almost 5 years ago, when AUC TV launched, President Anderson was the first interviewee, and she is back with us in the studio today to tell us more about where she sees AUC by its centennial. Welcome, President Anderson.
Thank you.
Also joining me in the studio today is Student Union President Mustafa Kamal, who is a political science senior. Welcome, Mustafa.
My pleasure. Thank you.
President Anderson, my first question for you today will be, why now? Why have you decided to step down now?
I think there comes a point when you will realize you've accomplished what you can accomplish. And after a certain point, if you continue beyond that, you're depriving an institution like AUC of new blood and new ideas and new energy and so forth. And as you can well imagine, the last 5 years have been probably worth 10 in the life of most people. So I think it's an appropriate time.
Mm-hmm. What will you be doing next?
Well, for the moment, I'm going to New York, which is where my family is, and I'll probably be doing a little bit of teaching at Columbia University, which is where I was before, and really thinking a lot about what kinds of conclusions we collectively as an institution, and I as a political scientist and someone interested in higher education, should draw from the experience of the last 5 to 7 years.
June also saw the announcement of the end of the budget deficit somewhat, and that a better projection for AUC's financial situation. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, I think the important thing that we did accomplish was demonstrate that there's really not what we had been concerned there might be, which is what you would call a structural deficit. In other words, the last few years, since the move to the new campus, there's been a lot of volatility in the budget. There's been a lot of unanticipated expenses, whether it's because of the move or subsequently because of the turmoil in the country. And so it wasn't clear through much of that time whether there was sort of a permanent deficit that we had to confront or whether it was something that was caused each year by a different factor. Ultimately, I think it's pretty clear that this is an institution in fine shape, that we obviously have confronted transitory problems, but it's a robust institution with a nice endowment, with a good economic position. And so I think, barring unanticipated events in the future, we ought to be in pretty good shape.
And Mustafa, this leads me to my first question to you. Your term began last May, and it was around that time that the student union really entered a lot of discussion with the administration, or made the concept of the endowment quite a big deal for the university community as a whole, and there was a big doubt about whether the budget deficit actually existed, and etc. But your term, carrying off from that, has been remarkably less action-packed, if I should say. Tell me why that is, or how have you come off from that much hype?
I believe that this happens for various reasons. Most importantly of which is our vision to the student union role within the institution as AUC itself. We have, since the elections, we have that sort of mentality that the union should play a very constructive role when it comes to the university. And instead of taking the students' side only, it should incorporate all the stakeholders of the community and try to mobilize their resources for the welfare of the community itself and its core participants, who are the students. This is one reason. The second reason, I believe, is as one of the major reasons you shed the light on, which is the very fair and stable situation when it comes to the budget. So we didn't have the normal discussions with that previous union used to pass through when it comes to increase in tuition, when it comes to downsizing of AUC, or selling out AUC property or whatever, because after all it was a calm year so far, and I believe that the university has been in a stance of a transition since the email was sent, Moreover, I believe that AUC is some sort of changing directions towards a reorientation of its role, and this makes the role of the union needed in such a shift and smooth in its operations instead of being action-backed, as you said. I believe that we're lucky to be in such a position here.
But with the university in such transition came the announcement quite recently that also caused a bit of a buzz with the student community of the late payments. What are your thoughts on that? And could you actually please explain a bit more about the situation?
There has been a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to the late payment thing. I admitted to AUC in 2011, and there was some sort of a late payment policy that would allow students to pay at the last day of the semester while taking their courses with a fine that is constant, that is fixed, which was, I believe, 1,500 or 2,000, I believe, in that range. Last year, the student union managed to achieve some sort of an accomplishment through the agreement with the administration that the add and drop should be followed with 3 days of payment, so as to accommodate the students who are very late when it comes to paying the fees. When it comes to this year, we had a very shocking rates. We had about 200 petitions by students to pay late, and none of them, a very small portion of them, had evidence or supportive documents, and they were on the verge of being rejected. But our efforts, along with the Vice President for Student Affairs, made us work to accommodate those cases and accept them to enroll and continue their education this semester. And there happened some sort of a decision or a direction that the university should cancel the petition door, and whoever does not pay on time should be deprived from the education this semester. However, we had to discuss that very strongly because it would harm a lot of students, and accordingly we had that sort of late payment policies that would not harm the students academically and would ensure that they continue their education for this semester. Moreover, we have managed to secure an option that whoever doesn't have the financial capacities to pay on time still has the option to pass by the Office of Financial Affairs and request an extension for this deadline, and it would happen to him, and they would automatically be okay with that on an exceptional, on a case-in-case exceptional basis. So, moreover, we're working, and we will be working for next semester to extend the operating capacity of the CIB branches, especially the one that is on campus, so we can better accommodate the students' demands and the student needs, and to make the policy very serving to the students' aspirations or issues.
Now, finances are always a contentious or controversial issue for AUCians, and they're perpetually concerned about how much the tuition fees are going to be and how much, the rate is going to continue to go up or not. And back in 2012, the student union negotiated a tuition cap model that did come to an end in 2015. As the student union enters the second portion of its year, and again as we enter 2016, what are some of the things that you're going to be working on regards to that? Are you going to extend? Are you thinking of another tuition cap model? And just as I ask this question of you, Mustafa, I'll also be asking it of you, President Anderson, of how you think the administration can also focus on those. But Mustafa?
Okay, I believe that our direction originates from the active involvement in the decision-making process, and we're having 3 major representatives in the budget committee that puts the allocation from different departments into one comprehensive budget of the university. I believe also that we will be pushing with the university with some strategic, when it comes to the strategic enrollment management, that would happen, that it would witness some sort of an increase this year if it is okay to the administrative point of view. We are also trying to work on new revenue streams that would help the university and that would sustain the tuition fees. But we haven't figured out anything yet so far. So I believe that from the accounts, from what we understand, that that AUC won't witness a huge and dramatic increase when it comes to tuition fees, and we're trying to ensure that the increase will be at the minimal at minimum, and if it exceeds, we would ensure also that it is a justified increase.
Mm-hmm. President Anderson, you worked extensively with the student union back when the strikes happened in 2012, and you came up with the current model. What would you say to the incoming administration with regards to that?
I think the thing that's important for everyone to remember is that AUC is not a for-profit institution, and so we don't charge tuition because we want to make money. We charge tuition to cover the costs of the education that we provide. And of course, we want excellent education, and therefore the balance of whether we charge less and have less good education or charge more and have better education is always a complicated issue to negotiate. I think the incoming administration will be thinking very hard about how to develop new revenue streams, to be thinking about other ways, because we don't want to charge tuition just for its own sake. Obviously, if we could afford to do this and not charge tuition at all, I think we would love to do that. So how is it that we, over the course of time, and as the centennial approaches, think about fundraising in a more ambitious way? Are there other things that we could be doing to underwrite the education and research that happens at AUC? So I think there may be, frankly, I think there are going to be continuing strains for the next few years. We're fundamentally out of the woods, but I think, to really have a sense that we have a stable, predictable economy for the university will take another few years. But I think we're pretty confident at this point that we know we can do this, and even if it does take a few years before we have something that's, you can predict 5 years from now, we're getting there, and, I'm pretty optimistic about that.
Mustafa, what, in your point of view, was the positives of working with President Anderson for this short period of time? But you were also a student union member before that. But as president, in this time, what do you think?
I believe we had a personal conversation yesterday regarding that, and I believe that regardless of anything, oblivious to the fact that Dr. Lisa is the president of AUC and I'm the president of the student union, aside from that, I personally learned a lot from her. The total amount of time that we sit together during the semester, I believe, summed up 4 hours, and I believe those 4 hours are in themselves an experience besides the experience of the union. And I'm not saying that because of President Dr. Lisa, but she's very knowledgeable. She has that sort of enriching insight when it comes to matters. I believe that aside from, I believe, we agree or disagree at some of the policies implemented, some of the paths pursued. We should not and we could not neglect its role as very constructive and very valuable to AUC throughout her time. Because I have a theory that AUC is part of the Egyptian community that has passed through a transition phase as Egypt, and we shouldn't have been waiting for a dramatic change or a very positive repercussion to the revolution on AUC, whereas the revolution did not have that repercussion on Egypt itself. I believe also that a lot of the administrative decisions this year helped us when it comes to the appointment of new leadership in most of the influential positions when it comes to university. A lot of them have the students' trust, a lot of them have the student support, like professors like Ahmed Tolba, like Provost Sharif Sidqi, even the newly Vice President of IT, who is Vice President Sharif Kamal. All of them had some sort of history, a historic bond between the students and them. This was another situation learned from AUC. I believe the farewell that I attended for Dr. Lisa was a very good indication that despite the fact that she is leaving, many members of the community still have the passion, have the will to come to attend her farewell, despite the fact that they may have some sort of disagreements, or they might have had disagreements during her period. That I believe this was a bit of an inspiration.
President Anderson, in your time at AUC, you've worked with a number of student union presidents, and all with different leadership styles. And this year in particular, it was, as I said earlier, dramatically different between the spring semester and in the fall. Do you find that this change is representative of the attitude in the community, or what do you think of this difference between how the student union functioned between both semesters?
I think, let me first say that I have enormous respect for anybody who's willing to serve as the president of the student union. This is a huge commitment of time and energy, and I just, I think everybody ought to have appreciation for everybody who's willing to do this. It makes an enormous difference in the life of the community, and particularly for the students, but actually for everybody. So I have clearly had disagreements with student union presidents. I think that's appropriate and natural. We sit in different situations, we see different things. I think there have been times when the strategy or the tactics of different student union presidents have been, maybe we can be more effective if we're confrontational, maybe we can be more effective if we're collaborative, let's try different approaches to this and so forth. I also think that's natural. My personal view is that collaborating tends to be more effective than being confrontational, although there are circumstances. Every student of American history knows there are times when confrontation is necessary, so I wouldn't rule it out altogether, but in general I think trying to collaborate works better. And I certainly think, and I hope that there's a general consensus, that this year has represented a collaborative approach on our part and on the part of the student union that has actually been very productive, and I hope that continues.
And with that, allow me to introduce our incoming field report. Our reporter, Sara Softi, took to the plaza this week to learn more about the students' concerns about the change in administration and some of the challenges that the community will face in the coming years. Here's her report. After that report, President Anderson, I will direct my first question to you. A big concern that the students have, and a recurring concern, is the issue of finances, and which we've already talked about. But do you think that finances are evenly distributed in the AUC community? Are there any offices or departments that could merit more funding, or could do more with more funding?
Anybody could do more with more funding. That's, not really what the challenge is. The challenge is what can you do with what you have, or indeed what can you do with perhaps even less, because you can't always just increase the pie completely. And there do have to be decisions, even when you're in fairly good economic conditions, when the budget is stable, where you have to say, in order to have this new initiative, or in order to promote a different kind of an interesting program here, we're going to have to take something away. You can't simply always have things that are added. So I think the challenge is not simply to say where are the areas of excellence that we want to support and enhance and so forth, but say, are we really doing everything that we can to be efficient in all of the parts of the university that have perhaps grown beyond what we need? And that can be on the administrative side, it can be in the academic areas, it could be anywhere. So the issue is, how do we distribute what we have, and then how do we plan for the future for what we will do when we have additional resources? Those are complicated questions, when everybody, of course, would love to have more.
And Mustafa, my second question goes to you. Many students are concerned that the student union this semester has worked on quite small-scale achievements and in organizing some more of the fun events, but not addressing any of the major concerns that students have, again, with regards to their tuition fees, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, as I told you, that we have that sort of things on plan. We're having a lot of things when it comes to discussions, when it comes to tuition fees. We have representatives there when it comes to budget for next year. We have our representative when it comes to the enrollment management and how this would affect university in coming years. We're having representatives in the University Senate discussing the policies of attendance, the policies of repeat, and other policies that may pertain of importance to the students. The point is, Dr. Lisa shed the light that we are somehow different when it comes to the strategy we're pursuing. We're not confrontational. I believe this can be a thing. We're some sort of collaborative. We're trying to passing through the official means, and we're trying to collaborate with different partners within university, and this takes us time to implement matters, because after all, we are in a very big institution, whereas bureaucracy is one of the key features, and I believe so. So it is not that easy to, and we had that discussion because with one of the vice president, without mentioning his name, that in order for the administration to send an email announcing a decision that was taken months ago, it takes time. So I believe for us to make that sort of change that we need to do, we spent, I believe, 3 months during the fall, from the summer up till October to acquire an approval to get the charging stations in the library. So it is a bit of a prolonged process for the students, for us to make that sort of change. This is one thing. Another thing is that we're trying to do some sort of a sustainable thing, because when we analyzed the performance of the previous union, we found that they were some sort of, and I was part of all the unions of last year's, but we found that there was some sort of a misallocation of funds and misallocation of resources. We used to spend a lot of money, whereas the students did not feel the effect. Accordingly, we're very wise when it comes to spending. We're very wise when it comes to where we should allocate our funds so as they could reach the students. And I hope that next semester performance would meet the students' expectations.
To follow up on that, President Anderson, do you think the bureaucracy of the university will present a challenge to the incoming administration, sort of mitigating that to expedite processes and make things happen faster?
I have to say, I think the bureaucracy of the university is frustrating to all of us. And part of the challenge for the next president, not necessarily the interim, but the next president, will be really to think about whether not only financial resources are allocated appropriately, but staff resources are allocated appropriately. Do we have the caliber of people we need at various levels within the administration so that they are responsive, they are attentive to the expectations of the various constituencies that they're supposed to be serving? And I think that is something that we have been concerned with, but I have to admit, more distracted by budget issues and so forth. I do think that that's going to be on the agenda for the next president. I think we collectively could be doing better than we do now, but it's not something we're not aware of.
And I will defer this back to President Anderson, but Mustafa, one other major concern was, aside from how long it took decisions to come to fruition for the student body to see what was happening behind the scenes, was that they felt that they were not represented enough. The students were not represented enough. Now, we are aware that there are students on almost every administrative committee. Students are in on the Senate. But what would you say to students that still don't feel that that is enough representation?
Again, I totally understand those concerns, and I feel that they are always legitimate for the students to have that, because there happened some sort of a miscommunication from our side to convey that message to them. But I believe that we're trying to do, as I told you, we're trying to do some sort of a progress when it comes to that. Especially that we are in a transition phase at some point. I remember during the elections campaign, we promised that we should initiate, and we would initiate some sort of a thing like the mock registration system. And when we started the year, we were surprised with the appointment of Dr. Tolba And we were very optimistic that we both shared plans when it comes to that. However, Dr. Tolba's plans would be effective starting fall, next fall, not next fall, the fall after. Whereas our thought that would be implemented within our year. And this gap to change such a thing, because I believe most of the students do suffer from the registration, most of the students do suffer from the courses enrollment, yet we did achieve some sort of a very minimal change, because we had that sort of mock simulation that the student union now have that power to at the help desk, student union help desk, where the students can make petitions to enroll the courses where the attendance or where enrollment is problematic. And meanwhile, we're working on the long run progress and on the long run plan when it comes to changing the system itself and changing the times where people do the registration and changing the banner system itself. So I believe that this is the point, that we're trying to change matters in a more sustainable matters. So instead of, I believe in this, this is very, I believe, frustrating for us, so the students feel misrepresented, but again, we feel that this would be a normal thing out of the fact that we're trying to change a system that those students suffer from, but the next generation would not.
Mm-hmm. A final student concern that I will bring forth to you, President Anderson, is that they're concerned that the incoming administration, whether interim or afterwards, would have different views on sort of freedom of expression on campus. In your time as president, there have been a number of strikes. There have been a number of, but by workers and by students alike, gate closure of 2012, etc. Do you think the incoming administration will be able to maintain maybe the same level, or will they have different views?
Well, it's certainly possible, since we don't know we know the interim president, but we don't know who the president is going to be, that the individual who's selected will not be as adamant about free expression as I've been. On the other hand, I think there is now a tradition established at AUC that respects the rights of people to protest, respects the rights of people to disagree with the administration and so forth, and that within, and to do that within some parameters that obviously you can't advocate violence, you can't be a vandal and so forth and so on, but this is a community in which we think policy comes out better if there's a debate about it, and that debate can take many different forms. I think there is now an established understanding that that's the way the university ought to work. So it would really take a substantial effort to change that, and I don't think any incoming president will think that there's an advantage to making that effort. So I think from this point of view, I'm not particularly concerned about that. The new president will probably have different priorities, which is fine, but there's no reason to go back on this and say, no, now all of a sudden people can't express themselves. So I think that will be sustained, and I think it's important. And I want to say, if I may, another thing, that I think one of the things that I hope that students begin to think about is that there are different time horizons. And students particularly, they look at the SU, they have an SU president for a year, and they say, okay, we want to see all these results. We want to see them instantly and so forth. For better or for worse, any institution that's approaching 100 years old is not going to be instantaneous in many of the things that it does. And that can be frustrating, and it'd be frustrating even for those of us who spend longer than a year in office. But I think that each student union has, over the course of the time, certainly that I've been here, had a discernible impact in improving the operation of the university. And that's really what students should hope for, that their representatives can have a visible impact in improving the university. And if students feel that their student union is not doing that, they should participate more. Nobody is preventing students from being involved, and I think that's, again, one of the reasons why I have the kind of respect I have for everybody who's been involved at the student union. These are people who are willing to put their time and energy where their mouth is, and I think that's important.
That was the end of our Vox Pop and Field Report section. I'd like to thank Sara Safti, Hania Al-Odi, and Rifan Abd al-Nabi. My next question, President Anderson, is directed to you. What advice would you give incoming interim president Thomas Thompson, and maybe if you have advice for the administration that will come following his interim period?
I think the challenge for this year and the challenge for an interim president is usually an interim president doesn't make huge changes. You're clearly a custodial responsibility and so forth. The big challenge is going to be putting together the budget for next year. And that's never a simple process, even in the best of times. I think it's going to be a complicated process this year, in part because although we are fortunate to have, as an interim president, a trustee who knows the budget process from that end, so it's not completely new, it still is going to be a little bit of catch-up to figure out how the process works from within the university and within the administration. So, and I think that is pretty much what his focus is going to be, budget issues, because we can't start in July without a budget. We can start in July without a lot of other things, but we're going to need a budget. So I think that's what his focus is going to be, as is appropriate, and I think he's quite well equipped to be able to do that. Going forward, of course, I think there are a lot of very interesting issues confronting the university that I hope the next president will embrace. The question of how AUC engages its community here in New Cairo and its community downtown. We should be seen as not only an asset to the country as a whole and the region, but also to our neighbors. What kinds of roles can we be playing in the Tahrir campus? What kinds of roles can we be playing out here in New Cairo that would be seen and understood as good neighbors? We want to be good neighbors. So there's some really interesting issues of that kind. Obviously, as we approach the centennial, there'll be opportunities for a lot of fundraising. I hope we're very successful at that. There's a lot of interesting things to be doing.
And Mustafa, how do you feel about being, almost the first student union president in nearly 5 years to have a switch up of the administration in the middle of your term?
I believe the situation won't be different because the situation since the email was sent gave us the indication that we are in that the transition phase has started by then. So changing President Anderson, switching from President Anderson to President Thompson surely would have negative consequences that it would take time when it comes to getting to introducing ourselves to Dr. Thompson and Dr. Thompson introducing himself to us and getting to know each other on the different we wouldn't be able easily to read his mind and his strategies for the short period of time. So I feel somehow skeptical, yet I hope I'm very positive that from our side we would maintain our work with the senior admins who are the vice president and the most influential in that time.
My final question goes to you, President Anderson. What would you say to Mustafa and the student union and the student body as they adapt to the coming, both the interim period and the coming administration?
Well, I think we're fortunate to know the interim president fairly well. He's a very genial and pleasant person, easy to get along with. I think, I think all of us who know him are quite comfortable with the idea that he will be here. He cares a great deal about the university. He's lived in Egypt for a long time. He's, I think from everyone's perspective, the best interim one could have hoped for. And as far as the search for a permanent president, I'm not sure how long that will take. I don't know when that announcement will be made. And of course, in universities, the president is not involved in the selection of a successor, so I'm not privy to that. But look, I think this is a very strong institution. I think AUC, I'm optimistic that the next president will be a wonderful president. There's no reason why that would not be the case. But honestly, presidents come and go. I mean, I meet alumni now who can hardly remember who the president was when they were here. I think, we tend to think this is an extremely important position, and of course, it must be. But it's also, the institution is very strong. It has a huge, strength in its support from its alumni, the caliber of the students, the commitment of the faculty. I mean, this is a great place. And it's important every once in a while to step back and realize that and say, all of us are going to work as hard as we can to make it better, but it's survived a lot and it will continue to survive a lot.
And with that, I'd like to conclude our show. First, I'd like to thank both of my guests, President Lisa Anderson, thank you very much for being here. Mustafa, thank you very much for being here. I'm Nadine Awadallah. This is AUC News. See you next time.